evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's presentation of Valley Veterans Forum here at CMAC in Fresno, California. My guest tonight is Tom Morton, a decorated Vietnam veteran who was a Marine. And Tom, why don't we start off by talking a little bit about your early life before the Marines?
Well, I grew up in the Navy, so I kind of had a career in the Navy, as my dad was a career Navy man. And we went around to a few places in the United States and Hawaii, and we actually lived a couple of years in Japan, which was really cool, and then settled down in San Diego, California, that county anyway, out in La Mesa. So I went through junior high and high school in San Diego, so there were lots of nice beaches there, so I spent a lot of time there and surfing and having a good time, and which kind of reflected my grades in school. They were okay, just enough to get by. Started college as soon as I got out of high school. That didn't go so well. I flunked out. Too much partying, you know. Join a fraternity, forget school.
That's usually the problem.
Yeah, people say I used to belong to a fraternity called Tapakega, but that's not the case. Okay. So I was doing nothing, and Vietnam was heating up. This is 1966. And you get little notices from the government about, hey, come, we need you. Yes, I said, no, I'm not going in the Army. So I joined the Marine Corps.
Smart. And what prompted you to join the Marine Corps?
Oh, well, the primary thing was they got those great-looking dress blue uniforms. Okay. So, you know, what else is there?
That makes sense.
Well, at 18 years old, there's, you know, you think you know it all, but...
Yeah. So how did you find boot camp? A guy who had been a previous surfer and party boy.
Well, in a word, it was a scream. Not necessarily me, but the drill instructors. They were on us, and it was a shock stepping off that bus initially and having to go stand in those yellow footprints. I'd never heard anybody yell so loud in my life or get so close to my face. Back then, I didn't know about individual space, but it was a real good wake-up call in that things weren't as you thought they were.
Yes.
So
I learned the same lesson in boot camp. Anyway, so Marines, you're finally graduate.
Well, yeah.
Well, there's one little incident I'd like you to reflect on, the marksman incident. I found that pretty interesting, having been in the Army myself.
Yes, you know, Marines are great shots. If you're not, if you don't qualify, you're just not a Marine. My platoon in boot camp was half reservists, so they pretty much weren't that into it, just to not get drafted and go to Vietnam. You know, CPAs, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And some of them have never held a weapon. Well, we had this one guy who couldn't hit anything. I mean, he scored, but nowhere near enough to get the lowest marksman badge. And I'd been shooting expert the entire.
Right.
So my drill instructor suggested, and you know what that's like, the suggestion from a drill instructor.
To point out here that you were a squad leader, that had something to do with it.
That had something to do with it, yeah. Because this guy I'd taken care of pretty much. He was in my squad. But I had to keep track of his score. And if he missed his target, I would tell him to shoot at my target for his next shot, and I would shoot at his target so he'd get enough points to get the marksman badge. So we qualified marksman, and oddly enough, we used to refer to the marksman badge as the toilet seat. Yeah. So, you know, overall, after I was made squad leader after about the first week or so, there are a lot of really good memories that are fun now as I look back on them. And at the time, they weren't difficult. They weren't still, you know, a thing that I felt I would reflect upon and enjoy later on. It's just, I got to get through this. And then I look back, there were funny things.
Because
like
relatively,
there were their bad times. I learned not to do certain things. You know, there are ways you can keep from getting in trouble.
Yes,
so
I found that out too.
So I did pretty well, but you know, I had my share of in your face. So.
And then you went on to radio school.
Yes.
Kind of followed in your father's footsteps, I understand, in that regard.
Yeah, he was a radioman, started out in World War II. He was what we call a Dits and Dahs radioman. Morse code.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I didn't want to be. I figured going to the Marine Corps. So thank you, USMC. They made me a Dits and Dots radioman. So went to radio school, and the first experience was headaches, because you're in a room and this stuff is
Right.
and it's bouncing off the walls,
Yeah.
which was accelerated in your head. But part of the school was also voice commands, voice operations.
Mm-hmm.
So being from San Diego, and that's where the radio school was, and most of the other guys that were in my class, not from San Diego, kind of went to me for where do we have a good time?
Yes.
Where do we meet girls? And I had to tell them the only place for our age was Tijuana. So we went down there, and young Marines in Tijuana, and inexpensive adult beverages. We'd go down there, and there was a place down there that was real good for meeting girls of our age who would come down there for the same reasons, for dancing. And it was just a great place to go, nice nightclub. And we had an incident there where we lost one of our guys.
Yeah.
So
I remember that, and he shows up later in the book, however, so we can touch on that later.
yes.
From there, you were hanging around, I guess, for what? How many months or?
Well, actually, it's about 30 days. I think I had to leave, and then went to what they called staging battalion up at Camp Pendleton,
Okay.
which is to prepare you for, I guess, the rigors of being in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And
This is after your orders had come down for Westpac?
oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, in radio school, at the end of radio school, the orders came down from Westpac, and,
Okay.
and everybody wanted to go to Vietnam, but not everybody did. Some went to other stations.
Right.
You know, like those poor guys had to go to Hawaii and Cherry Point. Yeah, rough
Such a
duty.
shame.
Yeah, but most of us wanted to go to Vietnam, and most of us did.
Did.
So anyway, staging battalion, and after that, expecting to fly over, I was surprised, as were a bunch of us, that we were going back down to San Diego, to the foot of Broadway, to board the Pope, the USNS
USN.
Pope,
Mhm.
and go over by ship. So that was really a shock. But I had a good time with that too, because my dad prepared me for that, having
Yeah,
been an old
having
sailor.
been in the Navy.
Yeah, he had some good advice for me, and it was really good. I enjoyed it, and I didn't get sick like almost everybody else.
Yeah,
And
that's a key issue.
yeah, he taught me how to take advantage of that,
Mhm.
to move up quickly in the chow lines, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting trip. Air conditioning went out for about 3 days.
Ooh,
and-
we didn't have that happen.
Yeah, well, it was fun, and I was on a top bunk, so all the hot air was up there.
Coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience traveling over on the Weigel, but now it's like one of those things where I do, looking back on that part of it, it was a fond memory actually, because we did have fun, especially after we stopped in Okinawa, as you
Oh.
did.
Oh, yeah.
on the way.
Oh, yeah.
Ours was just a 6-hour leave, but we got a few of our guys got in a little bit of trouble in that 6-hour period of time.
What?
So you went on from Okinawa
I was just thinking about, you Army guys got 6 hours off?
6.
We got 4. That's it. 4 hours. Eating good food and drinking a lot of beer, and then back on the ship, and then off we go to Vietnam. I want to think, I think it was maybe a week more, something like that. And we got outside Da Nang Harbor in the middle of the night, and that's something that stayed with me and made me realize that this wasn't a party.
Yeah.
This was serious. That was the first indication to me. 'Cause at night, you can hear gunfire, rocket
Sure.
fire, all kinds of, you know there's something going on.
Something going on.
And flashes now and then. And I think most of us thought, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
And that lasted for a while, and then it kind of went away in training, as you know. You're trained to do a job, and that's what you focus on. If you focus on other things, you don't get your job done.
So your first actually posting was in Fubai,
Yes.
and you kind of weren't really doing anything there. From what I can understand from your book, it's like you wanted more action.
Yes, that's it. You join in the Marine Corps. One of the reasons is the action. I mean, first in, last to leave, never back down, all that kind of stuff. So there I was in Fubai in the summertime, I don't know, 120-degree heat, at 3rd Marine Division headquarters, and I was filling sandbags. That's what I did all day long.
Yeah,
Fill sandbags.
120-degree heat. It's not the most fun thing to do.
No. And I think I covered in the book every day when I take a shower. It was cold shower and walk back with just a towel and air dry.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much it. Well, you get real tired of that. The best thing about when I was at Fubai was the runs we went to Wei. A lot of people are familiar with Wei, and what they remember Wei Wei is it was a huge battle in, was it February, March 1968. And I got to see it in, what was it, August, September. It was really good. It was nice. A very beautiful city.
Yeah.
It was the ancient capital, the citadel there. Well, it was very nice.
Yeah, because you mentioned that in your book, and I tried to research and find some good pictures of Wei, the provincial capital, before all the action, and there really weren't any. So I guess a lot of the beautiful parts of the city were destroyed during that conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard people talk about Wei, and they don't believe that when we took Wei back, we discovered, not me, but the U.S. discovered mass graves of officials of Wei that had been massacred and then buried by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese.
Yeah.
To this day, some people don't believe that, but you can research it, and
Sure.
it was covered in the news at the time, and you need to study that. So those are things we don't want to forget.
People in general have a hard time believing that atrocities like this exist, and that's part of the reason why there are only 1% of the population in the military these days.
Yeah.
But nevertheless.
Yeah.
So you had you created an option for yourself, 2 different alternatives.
Yeah, one day they had posted on a bulletin board they're looking for volunteers, machine gun door gunners on helicopters, and for something called CAC, Combined Action Company, I think it was. Well, I didn't know what they were, but the only thing I knew is I wanted out of Fubai, go somewhere else. Machine gunner on a helicopter, yeah, that sounded great.
Sounded
you know,
dangerous
yeah,
enough.
yeah, bang bang and all that kind of stuff. You know, at 18, 19 years old, that sounds great. The other thing, I had no idea what it was, but I figured cover all the bases, volunteer for both of them. And of course, my luck, the machine gunner thing didn't come through, but the CAC did. I said, well, it's got to be better than being here filling sandbags. So I did that, and they sent me to a school down in Da Nang 2 weeks, and I found out that what we did in CAC was live in villages. A squad of Marines and a corpsman would live in a village, and the only support we had was away from us. And the what was called popular forces, which basically is the village militia.
Village militia.
So they weren't exactly dependable all the time. You didn't know if one of them was doubling as a VC too at night.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about the Chu Hoi program and how that dovetails into what we're talking about right now.
The Chu Hoi program is they take Viet Cong, come to the South Vietnamese side. They're given some benefits, and they're assigned to American units. Both Army, I understand. I didn't know that until recently, but the Marine Corps. So we had one. His name was Lee Da, and when they come into the Marine Corps, they are issued Marine Corps gear. They are treated as Marines, and they live with the Marines as part of the squad. And the PFs treated them like Marines. So they were well respected because they were Marines.
Right.
Anyway, he was real good. He was a good guy, and we had some fun with him because with his broken English and our broken Vietnamese, we had some really good times in jabbing each other. He was, Tet in '68, he was awarded a American Bronze Star with Combat V for his deeds. Him and there was another Chu Hoi from another unit that was there. They both held one wall.
That's one of your awards, is it not?
Yes, I have a Bronze Star Combat V.
With the Combat V. And you're a Purple Heart holder, of course, too.
Yes.
Fast forwarding a little bit to some of the incidents. I don't know if this happened in Kamlo. I'm not sure, but I recall reading about an ambush that was actually a made-up ambush.
Yeah.
For educational purposes.
Yes, for my educational purposes. That was at Papa 5 or P5, Combined Action.
Combined Action, yeah.
This is a platoon. As a radioman, they slapped the radio on my back and we went out on an ambush. And what do I know? An ambush, and we're going to have somebody come through and we're going to shoot them up. So I'm sitting there and there's nobody. Something happens on the radio. I don't know what they're doing. It turns out it's a situation report. You know, how's everything going? So I learned that, and after our 4-hour stint out there, I'm tapped on the shoulder and it's my squad leader, and let's go in. So I get in and I find out. Oh, I tell him, hey, nothing happened. What kind of an ambush is that? And he said, well, actually, we left you out there alone and watched you. So, and you did fine. So
it's
you'll
fining.
Yeah.
You passed your training.
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't panic. Didn't move.
Probably one of the more telling parts of your book is your description of what happened in Tet of '68, and in your own words, that your closest brush with death up to that time.
It was. Well, that's where I got my Purple Heart. It, in a nutshell, during the attack, I was in the comm bunker and
Communications bunker.
communications bunker. Yeah. And a 106 recoilless rifle round came through the wall about 2-3 feet above my head, wounded me and knocked me on my butt, but it killed the guy, the major, standing right behind me with his hand in the small of my back, looking over my shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
So. When I came to, which I don't know how long it was, but I don't think it was that long, I got up and continued what I was doing, tended to the other wounded in the bunker, and did what I was supposed to do, did what I was trained to do. So.
Now, this is, as I recall, this is all part of your first 6 months there, or is that?
That's pretty much the start of the second.
The start of the second 6 months. You'd already come back from your R&R and.
Right, that was kind of the transition period.
Right.
It was right after Tet that I went on R&R.
Okay,
So
right after Tet.
Yeah, but they took us out of Papa 5 because there was intelligence that there's going to be a major attack. So we had some sort of intelligence that there was something going on. And because they couldn't support us, because we were really an isolated compound, ours was, and support everything else that they might have to support the larger bases, they pulled us out of there and distributed us to other places. And I ended up at Kamlo District Headquarters, where they kept me after Tet. So.
Were you there for the rest of your tour? Or, as I recall, you were in a couple of different places.
Yes. I was there at Kamlo and at Kamlo Headquarters, Combined Action Headquarters. They made a temporary CAP unit to handle refugees from the highlands, Montagnards, or sometimes called the Brew. And so we had a temporary compound before they were resettled in an area, oddly enough, the area where I had worked is in Papa 5. So I was kind of there, I don't know why, but because I had worked there, I guess. And that was an interesting experience in that I got to experience friendly fire from not one source, but from two sources at the same time. And then dealing with the people and the village chief, part of our stuff as a combined action person was you work with the local people, especially the village chief. And we all had to take turns going over for dinner at the village chief's and this, that, and the other.
You almost got married off to his
Almost
daughter.
got married off, yeah. So.
But you gracefully declined, as you were already a married man.
Yeah. Yes.
Good.
Yes. And you eat strange things when you go to a village chief's house, and it turns out the day that I went, I ended up with dysentery, which was another brush with death.
People don't realize how bad dysentery can be until they've had it. Not only uncomfortable, but how life-threatening it could be because you're so dissipated.
By the time our corpsman figured out what was going on, I had gotten quite weak. I couldn't stand. And so they had to carry me onto a PC and drive me to Delta Med in Dong Han.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor there gave me some stuff, and then he didn't put one IV of fluid in me, they put 2 IV fluids. So here I am at a major trauma medical place, and people around me are dying and being wounded, and I'm just laying there. After that, I went to Hawaii, had a good time there with the wife, and an experience with a belly dancer before the wife got there. That was fun.
You have to buy the book to learn,
to
learn about that.
There are some details in there, but it was fun. It was a good experience. Went back, and they sent me to another unit, Papa 3, which was between Cam District Headquarters and Dong Ha, and I think that's where I experienced the Ville thing that you wanted me to read. So
I would like you to read that.
Want to do that right now?
Particular chapter, because it's very touching, as I found it to be.
I didn't have to wear these before.
Well, good. I've had
in the book, it's titled In the Ville.
in the Ville.
A combat zone heightens awareness and senses. When I hear mortars, artillery, rockets fire off in the distance, I know if they are coming my way. I hear the sound of mortars firing. They are headed in my direction. I gather up my gear and start for the bunkers. Everyone does. We hear the explosions of the 61mm mortar shells. Shit, those hit the Ville. We run toward the explosions. It doesn't appear bad. A few huts hit, damaged minimal. And it is quiet. The smoke smells of cordite and dirt of a freshly plowed field drifts languidly through the area. Slowly it starts. Screams, sobs. Sergeant Cook and I run into a slightly damaged hut, drawn in by the screams. Screams of children. We find 3 little girls, the oldest about 12 years old. All 3 scream uncontrollably, scared out of their minds. They're on their knees around what appears to be a woman, but the woman seems small, smaller than she should be. When we get to her and the children, we see why. Only shreds of her pant legs remain where her legs should be. She is drenched in blood. Her head turns from side to side, looks from child to child. The children's faces, wet with tears, contort in horror. They are afraid to touch her. Blood is splattered on them, but they are not wounded. We rush to help the woman. To get to her wounds, we tear away what remains of her clothes. Numerous shrapnel wounds dot her head, arms, and abdomen. Blood spurts from where her legs once were. She looks at us, one at a time, not really seeing us. All goes quiet, so it seems, as we try to stop the bleeding where her legs had been. There's no place to tie a tourniquet. Finding the artery is unsuccessful. As the blood flow slows, so do her head and arm movements. Then she is still. Check her eyes. Nothing. For her, it is over. Sarge starts CPR. I don't know what else to do. There's nothing more I can do. Sit, watch as he tries to revive her. I know she's dead. Her children know. Finally, in a daze, so does Sarge. It is quiet. I feel helpless, responsible, and vengeful. Suddenly, I hear the children again. All the other sounds in the Ville become audible as well. The girl's sobs become more mournful and heartbreaking. Sarge, Sarge, Dan. He looks at me, his eyes angry red, his face wet from sweat and tears. I fucking hate those goddamn bastards. They try but can't zero in on us, and these people end up paying for it. There's nothing more we can do. Check the rest of the Ville. Our guys take care of the wounded, call in medevac choppers. The wounded are flown to Delta Med in Dong Ha. The villagers tend to the dead and the children.
As we both have pointed out in private conversations, it's the children that are often the victims of war, as we saw many orphans when I was over there, and you probably did too, who either had lost both of their parents and were living. And in some ways, the orphans' children were treated much like the Montagnards were treated like by their own people.
Right.
They were looked at as a lower class of folk for some reason, which is another thing that I learned about racial inequality. I learned about that in the Army.
You mentioned the Montagnards. they were second-class citizens of the Vietnamese. And
Right.
they didn't get along, and they didn't work well. And at that village I was telling you about, the refugee village, we had Vietnamese and the Montagnards. So it was a touchy situation.
Touchy situation, yeah. Well, Tom, I'm certainly glad that you were able to come and tell at least part of your story today, of your book. I want to congratulate you for working so diligently on this for all these years and finally getting it done. I know it's been a passion for you for some time.
Yes.
And I thank you for coming on today. Why don't you tell us where people can get a copy of this book?
Well, you can get him at createspace.com, and there's a little thing at the right corner that says site. We'll click on that and it'll say store. And on the search thing, just type in Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, and it'll come up quicker if you add Tom Morton to it.
Tom Morton.
Same thing for every place else, like Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Please feel free to email me at WTFMorton@Comcast.net, and my website is www.wtfmorton.com.
Excellent.
And thank you for having me on. And you're doing a good service for us veterans here in the Valley, and there are many of us who appreciate it.
Well, I'm doing this because, it's, as you mentioned, it's therapeutic for me. And the more stories like yours that I hear, the more convinced I am that even though Vietnam was a lost cause for us, what it did was, one of the things I'm certain of, because it's been acknowledged by the VA, is that we are responsible for bringing to the public's attention post-traumatic stress disorder and learning about how to treat it and address it. So nothing else, we've accomplished something for future military folks in this country.
Talking about the future, those veterans now coming back from the Middle East, there's help available, and it's free. VA, vet centers, I think they're taking you guys, but there's help out there, and you have to trust them.
Okay, excellent. Well, Tom, we're running out of time. Again, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to welcome our viewers back again to watch Valley Veterans Forum and future editions that we will be putting out, and appreciate your time and effort in coming down here today to visit with us. Thank you.